Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today we're doing something honestly pretty amazing. We're taking a static piece of ancient literature and totally transforming it into a dynamic 3D spatial tour. Think of it less like reading a dusty old poem and more like walking through a massive, fortified city alongside a master architect. The text is literally structured as a physical journey, starting with these sweeping cinematic landscape shots and zooming all the way down to the individual stones of the city walls. So let's dive right in and see how this ancient song maps out a physical and spiritual fortress.
All right, just to ground ourselves, let's look at the exact source material we're working with today. This is Psalm 48, and we're looking at the English Standard Version translation. It's attributed to the sons of Korah, who were these prominent musicians and poets back in ancient Israel. And what we're doing today is looking really closely at the architectural and spatial language they used here, because these guys weren't just writing about a city. They are literally acting as our tour guides.
Here is the exact roadmap they laid out for us. First, the Holy Mountain. Second, the Panic of the Kings. Third, stepping inside the temple. And finally, telling the next generation.
All right, Section 1, the Holy Mountain. This is our wide landscape shot.
Right out of the gate, in verses 1 and 2, the authors construct this massive, towering image. Mount Zion isn't just a dot on a map, it's described as beautiful in elevation. It completely dominates the landscape. The text calls it the joy of all the earth, sets it way up in the far north, and crowns it as the city of the great king. So picture yourself looking up at this absolutely stunning, massive fortress. And this right here sets up the core theme for the whole tour. In verse 3, the authors link the physical architecture, the citadels, straight to divine protection. They talk about these strongholds, but here's the catch. The physical stone, that's not the real defense. Within those walls, God himself is the fortress. The physical city is just this tangible, visible representation of an impenetrable safety.
Moving on to Section 2, Panic of the Kings. Let's check out the outer defenses.
Verses 4 and 5 are an absolute masterclass in pacing. Just look at how fast this goes down. Step 1, the enemy kings assemble. They're grouping up to attack. But then step 2, they actually get a good look at the city, that massive fortress we just talked about, and everything changes. Step 3, they are completely astounded and just lose it. Pure panic. Step 4, they run for their lives. There's no drawn-out siege. There's no epic battle. The mere sight of this place completely shatters their resolve. The key takeaway here is the intense emotional whiplash the text creates. Think about it. On one side, you have the imagery established for the city. Beautiful, elevated, joyful, basically established forever. But on the other side, the attacking kings are terrified, trembling, panicking, in total anguish. The text literally compares it to a woman in labor. By throwing this unshakable gladness right up against the sudden, agonizing terror of the enemies, the authors are hammering home just how unbelievably secure this fortress really is.
Then, totally out of nowhere, we get this hit of violent, natural imagery. Verse 7 says, "By the east wind you shattered the ships of Tarshish." Now, context time. The ships of Tarshish were the absolute titans of the ancient world. They were the peak of human engineering and economic power. But against the city's divine defense, they are effortlessly smashed to pieces by a single wind. It's a huge metaphor confirming that no external threat, no matter how technologically advanced or heavily armed, even stands a chance.
Right after that chaotic scene of fleeing kings and splintering ships, verse 8 ends with one very specific word, Selah. This is a really unique punctuation mark in the source text. Scholars mostly agree it's a liturgical or musical pause. Think of it like taking a deep breath. The authors are basically telling us, okay, stop, pause the music, and let the smoke clear from the battlefield, because we're about to leave the chaotic exterior of the city and step into a quiet, sacred space.
Which brings us to Section 3, inside the temple, the inner sanctum.
Notice how completely the vibe changes here. Verses 9 through 11 take us right inside the temple. All that talk of panic and shattering winds, totally gone. Now the inhabitants are thinking on steadfast love. The focus zooms way in for some quiet reflection and then zooms right back out, but this time with praise that reaches the ends of the earth. You've got this beautiful imagery of a right hand filled with righteousness. It creates this profound, deep sense of spiritual order and safety. And all of that translates into pure celebration. Because those outer walls held firm against the kings, the people deep inside the city can just rejoice. Verse 11 says, "Let Mount Zion be glad. Let the daughters of Judah rejoice because of your judgments." The victory won out there at the physical boundary, it directly fuels the gladness, the safety, and the cultural joy for everyone living inside. And finally, Section 4, telling the next generation, it's time to walk the walls.
This is where we get one of the most dynamic calls to action in the whole text. The authors flat out invite us to physically engage with the city. Walk about Zion, go around her, number her towers, consider well her ramparts, go through her citadels. They want us to inspect the masonry, count the defenses, run our hands over the stone. It's this incredibly vivid, hands-on instruction to examine the reality of the fortress we've just spent this whole tour exploring. But why? Why do they want us to count the towers?
Well, they give us the answer right after. We're told to inspect those walls so that you may tell the next generation that this is God, our God, forever and ever. So the physical act of walking the walls is tied directly to memory and legacy. The architecture isn't just there to keep the bad guys out today. It's a teaching tool. It's a massive monument designed to outlast the people who built it, preserving their story for kids who haven't even been born yet.
Now, before we wrap up, I have to share this absolutely fascinating detail buried in the footnotes of our text. The standard ESV translation ends verse 14 with, "He will guide us forever." But if you look at the footnote, ancient translations like the Greek Septuagint and the Syriac texts have a slightly different spin. He will guide us beyond death. Honestly, that subtle shift is mind-blowing. It takes this physical tour of a literal stone city and suddenly launches it into eternity. It shifts the whole perspective from earthly history to an ultimate eternal legacy.
So, this ancient song, it's not just a map. It's a blueprint for legacy. The authors of Psalm 48 wanted their descendants to look up at those walls and know exactly who they were and who protected them. And I think that leaves us with a really powerful question for our own lives today. What stories, monuments, or legacies are you actively building? What kind of walls are you constructing that'll make the next generation stop and ask questions so you can pass down your history? Thank you so much for coming along on this tour. Keep inspecting the architecture of the information around you, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.